sold for just $1 and written off by everyone. This rejected horse's incredible journey will show you the true power of hope, love, and second chances. The summer sun was hot and sharp as it beat down on the old wooden fence of the auction yard. Dust swirled through the air with every step, and the smell of hay, sweat, and tired animals hung heavy around. In the corner of the yard, far from the eye, loud voices and excited buyers, stood a thin, dirty horse. He looked tired. His coat, once a deep chestnut brown, was dull and patchy. His mane was tangled and matted, his hooves were cracked, and one of his eyes had a cloudy white spot that made people think he was blind. He didn't move much, just stood there, tied to a post, swishing his tail slowly to keep flies away. His name was Dusty, but nobody there knew that, and nobody really cared. Dusty had not always been like this. Long ago, he had been fast and full of energy. He had run across wide-open fields, his hooves pounding the ground like thunder. But those days were gone. He had been sold many times to different owners, some of whom had treated him roughly, others who had simply ignored him. Each new place left him a little more broken, a little more scared. He had learned to keep his head low and not expect kindness. At this point, he didn't expect much of anything. The auction yard was busy. People walked around looking at the animals, calling out bids and shouting over each other. Horses, cows, goats, and even some chickens were being sold. But no one came near Dusty. A few people glanced at him and moved on quickly. One man laughed and said, "That one's good for glue and nothing else." Another woman whispered to her husband, "Why would they even bring a horse like that here?" Dusty didn't react to the words. He had heard worse. It felt worse. His ribs showed clearly through his skin, and the deep scar on his hind leg told a story no one asked about. He stood there, a forgotten animal, waiting for something. Even if it was only the end. Among the crowd was a girl named Emily. She was 15. Wearing an old pair of jeans and a sun-faded cap, she wasn't like the other buyers. She wasn't loud or rushed. She wasn't rich either. Emily had come with her grandfather, who often bought tools or farm supplies from auctions like these. But this time, Emily had begged him to take her to the livestock area. She didn't know exactly why, she just felt like she needed to. Emily walked through the rows of horses with quiet eyes. She stopped to pet a few, but they weren't what she was looking for, though she didn't really know what she was looking for. Then out of the corner of her eye, she saw Dusty. He was half hidden behind a stack of hay bales and barely moved.
Ow!
Something about him made her stop. He looked sad, almost too tired to lift his head. But there was something else too, a flicker of life, a spark deep in his eye that hadn't gone out yet. She walked slowly toward him, careful not to scare him. When she reached out her hand, he didn't move. She gently touched his nose. It was rough and dry, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he blinked slowly and let her keep her hand there. A long moment, they just stood like that, a silent understanding passing between them. Grandpa Emily called softly without turning. Around her grandfather, a tall man with weathered hands and a quiet voice, came over. He took one look at Dusty and frowned. "That horse ain't worth a thing, Em," he said gently.
Oh, looks like he's half dead already.
"I know," she replied, "but I want him." Her grandfather raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Don't even know if he can walk properly. Might be blind in that one eye. Could be trouble." Emily nodded. "I don't care. I want him." Her grandfather sighed but smiled a little. He had always admired her heart, even if it sometimes led her to hard roads. Well, let's see what they ask. When Dusty's turn finally came at the auction, the auctioneer didn't even try very hard. "All right, folks, we got a brown stallion here. Bit older, looks like. Any takers?" Silence. No one said a word. The auctioneer tried again, starting at $100. Still nothing? "Okay, how about $50? "No, $20. Someone chuckled in the crowd. Another person said, "You'd have to pay me to take him." The auctioneer looked uncomfortable. "All right then. Anyone? $1? Emily raised her hand. The crowd looked around, surprised. The auctioneer blinked. "We have a bid for $1. Anyone else?" "No, sold for $1. There was laughter, a few jokes, and then everyone moved on. But for Emily, something had changed. That $1 had bought her more than just a horse. It had bought her a new beginning, though she didn't fully understand it yet. Dusty was led out of the ring and handed over. The man who brought him shook his head and said, "Good luck, kid. That horse is more trouble than he's worth." Emily didn't answer. She just took the rope gently and walked Dusty toward the truck. Her grandfather had already backed the trailer up. Loading Dusty wasn't easy. He hesitated, shook his head, and even tried to back away. But Emily stayed calm. She didn't pull or shout. She just stood near his head and whispered softly, rubbing his neck. After a few long minutes, he stepped forward and entered the trailer, as if deciding to trust her just a little. The drive home was quiet. Emily looked out the window, thinking about what came next. She knew it wouldn't be easy. The horse was in bad shape. He looked like he hadn't been cared for in years, but something deep inside her told her that Dusty wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. When they reached the farm, Emily led Dusty to a small fenced area with soft grass and clean water. He stood still, unsure of his new surroundings. Her parents came out of the house and took one look at the horse. "You paid for that?" her mother asked, surprised. $1, Emily said proudly. Her father scratched his head. "You sure he's not sick?" "I'll take care of him," she promised. Over the next few days, Emily worked hard. She cleaned Dusty's stall, brushed out his dirty coat, and treated the sores on his legs. She read books, watched videos, and even called a local vet who agreed to visit for free after hearing the story. The vet confirmed what everyone had guessed: Dusty was severely underweight, possibly abused, and had damage to one eye. But he wasn't beyond saving. He's got fight in him, the vet said after the checkup. "You treat him right, he might surprise you." Emily smiled. She had already started to believe that. Dusty didn't warm up immediately. He flinched when anyone raised a hand too quickly. He wouldn't let Emily put a saddle on him. Some days he wouldn't even let her get close, but she didn't give up. Every morning before school, she fed him. Every evening she sat near him, sometimes reading out loud or just sitting in silence. She learned his moods, his habits, and slowly, Dusty began to respond. The first time he nuzzled her shoulder, Emily cried quietly, her hand resting gently against his neck. She knew then that she had done the right thing. Everyone else had given up on Dusty. Everyone had turned away from the broken horse, but not her. And somehow, she felt that Dusty knew it. Weeks turned into months, and Dusty began to change. His coat grew shinier, his legs grew stronger, started walking with more energy, even running across the field sometimes. He was still shy, still cautious, but he was healing. Emily never rushed him. She let him set the pace. And the bond they built, slow and steady, was something rare and beautiful. She didn't care that people still called her the girl who bought a broken horse. She didn't care about the jokes. All she cared about was Dusty, and deep down, she knew that this was only the beginning of their journey. Dusty's new life had just begun, but the road ahead was filled with more challenges than Emily had expected. The excitement of bringing him home slowly gave way to the hard reality of what saving a broken horse truly meant.
Oh.
Dusty had lived. Through years of pain and neglect, his body carried scars. But even more than that, his heart carried fear. And healing fear takes time. Every morning, Emily woke up early before school. While most of her classmates were still asleep, she was outside, wearing old boots and a jacket, walking to the small barn where Dusty waited. Sometimes he would be standing by the fence, ears back and eyes alert, unsure if it was safe to come close. Other times he would stand quietly in the far corner of the field, pretending not to notice her. Emily never forced him. She would softly call his name, shake the feed bucket just once, and wait at first. Dusty wouldn't eat unless she backed away and gave him space. He would sniff the feed, look around nervously, and finally take a few bites. But over time, that changed. Slowly. He started trusting her presence. He let her stand closer. Then he let her touch his neck while he ate. One morning, he even walked up to her without being called. Emily knew that was a small victory, but to her, it felt like winning a trophy. Her parents watched the whole thing with quiet support. They didn't understand why she had chosen this horse, but they saw the way she cared for him. Emily never complained, not even on cold mornings or rainy evenings. While her friends posted pictures of parties and games online, Emily's world was all about feed schedules, grooming brushes, learning everything she could about horse rehabilitation. The early weeks were the hardest. Dusty had sores that needed cleaning and old wounds that sometimes reopened. His teeth were in bad shape, and he had trouble chewing certain foods. A kind neighbor, who had once worked with retired racehorses, offered Emily some tips and even donated a few supplies. Another day, a retired vet dropped off a few old books on horse care. Emily read every page, often late into the night, making notes and drawing up feeding plans. She also learned that love alone wasn't enough. Dusty needed the right food, the right medicine, and the right routine. Emily started saving her allowance, doing extra chores, and even babysitting on weekends to earn money for his care. Every dollar she earned went into Dusty's needs. She didn't mind. Every time she saw him look a little healthier, every time he let her get a little closer, it felt worth it. But progress wasn't always steady. Some days Dusty would act like he didn't remember her at all. He'd shy away from her touch, refuse to come when called, or even get scared and kick the fence. Emily cried more than once, sitting on a hay bale after a long day, wondering if she had made a mistake. But each time, she reminded herself why she started. Dusty had been thrown away by the world. He didn't trust people because people had hurt him. Earning his trust wasn't going to be easy. She had to earn it every day, slowly, gently, one weekend. Emily decided to try brushing Dusty's mane properly for the first time. She had always done it carefully, just a little at a time, not wanting to startle him. But now, with some trust built between them, she thought maybe he was ready. She stood beside him, held the brush gently, and began working through the knots. Dusty flinched once, but didn't move away. Emily whispered softly the whole time, telling him about her day, about school, and about her dreams of one day riding him through the open fields. Halfway through the brushing, Dusty did something that made her heart skip. He rested his head lightly on her shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it said so much. It said, "I'm not scared right now." It said, "I think I trust you." Emily didn't move for a while. She just let him rest his head, her hand still holding the brush, tears gathering in her eyes. That moment stayed with her for a long time. By the end of the second month, Dusty had gained some weight. His coat began to shine again, and the scars on his legs started to heal. His eyes, once dull and lifeless, now watched her with curiosity. He still didn't like loud noises, and sudden movements made him jump. But the frozen fear that used to be in his body was melting little by little. Emily wanted to take their training to the next level. She set up a small paddock near the barn, where she could work with him gently. She didn't use a saddle or reins, not yet. Instead, she worked on voice commands, walking patterns, and just getting Dusty used to movement. Again. At first, he wouldn't even walk in a straight line. He'd stop randomly, look around, or even try to escape. But Emily was patient. She never raised her voice. She never used force. Every time Dusty did something right, no matter how small, she gave him a gentle pat and a treat. One afternoon, while walking Dusty in circles, she clicked her tongue and said, "Let's trot." To her surprise, he moved into a slow, graceful trot without resistance. She wasn't expecting that. Dusty moved beautifully, his legs strong and smooth, like he remembered how to do it. Emily's grandfather, who was watching from the fence, clapped softly. "That horse has more left in him than we thought," he said. Emily smiled. She already knew. News of Dusty's progress started spreading around town. A few neighbors stopped by to see him. One woman said, "Is this the same horse you got from that auction?" Emily nodded proudly. It was hard to believe. The skinny, broken horse they had seen before was now standing tall, alert, and strong. He was still recovering, but he looked like a completely different animal. Emily knew there was a long way to go. Dusty still had fears buried deep inside him. One evening, a thunderstorm rolled in suddenly. The loud cracks of thunder and flashes of lightning sent Dusty into a panic. He bolted around the field, eyes wide with fear, sweat pouring from his body. Emily ran into the rain without hesitation. She opened the gate, stepped into the storm, and slowly approached him, whispering softly through the thunder. "It's okay, Dusty, I'm here. I've got you." Took a while, but he finally stopped running. He let her take the rope and lead him back to the barn. Both of them were soaked, but neither cared. Inside the barn, Emily dried him with old towels and stayed with him until the storm passed. That night, Dusty fell asleep with his head near her lap, and Emily leaned back against the hay. Exhausted but happy, each new challenge taught her something. Patience, trust, kindness, and Dusty taught her most of all. He didn't speak, but he had a language of his own. A flick of the ear, a shift in his weight, the look in his eyes, all of it meant something. Emily learned how to listen, how to understand what he needed. And in return, Dusty gave her more than she could explain. He gave her purpose, gave her confidence. He gave her a reason to believe in second chances. One day, a local trainer named Mr. Holt visited the farm. He had heard about the girl and the $1 horse. At first, he came just to see what the fuss was about. But when he saw Dusty in the paddock, moving with grace and listening to Emily's voice, he raised an eyebrow. "That horse," he said slowly, "has real potential." Emily looked at him in surprise. "You think so?" Mr. Holt nodded. "I've trained a lot of horses. Most don't have what he has: natural form, spirit, and trust in his handler. That's not something you can teach overnight," he offered. To help Emily train Dusty just a few hours a week, for free.
Emily was thrilled. With Mr. Holt's guidance, she began learning more advanced training techniques. He showed her how to build strength in Dusty's legs, how to encourage better
balance, and how to read his body even more carefully. Dusty responded well. It was as if the training awakened something deep inside him, a memory of what he once was, or maybe a dream of what he could still become. Emily began keeping a journal. Each day she wrote down what they worked on, what went well, and what needed more time. Her notes were full of little moments: Dusty taking a jump over a pole for the first time, Dusty letting her place a saddle blanket on his back without flinching, Dusty trotting in perfect rhythm beside her. These weren't just notes, they were proof of their journey together. At school, Emily was still the quiet girl, but her teachers noticed she had changed. She was more focused, more confident. One day her English teacher asked the class to write about something that changed their life. Emily wrote about Dusty. She didn't share every detail, but the story of a broken horse learning to trust again touched everyone who read it, more than once. Someone would stop her in the hallway and say, "Hey, I heard about your horse. It's pretty amazing." Emily would smile and nod, her heart full of quiet pride. Dusty had gone from being an unwanted, rejected animal to a horse with a future. And Emily had gone from being a regular girl to someone with a mission. They still had a long way to go, but now they were walking the road together with trust, with hope, and with a bond that nothing could break. The bond between Emily and Dusty grew stronger with each passing day. What began as a quiet connection had now turned into deep trust. Dusty had started to look healthier, stronger, and more alert. His eyes no longer carried fear all the time. Sometimes, Emily even caught him playing in the pasture, tossing his head or running for no reason other than joy. It was a beautiful change, something that made her heart swell every time she saw it. But with growth came new challenges. Mr. Holt, the experienced trainer who had offered to help, decided one day that it was time for Dusty to wear a saddle again. Emily was nervous. Dusty had never allowed anything like that in the past. She still remembered how he used to panic at the sight of a rope or even a blanket. But Mr. Holt believed in going slow and steady. One sunny afternoon, they took Dusty to the paddock. Emily stood beside him, holding the reins gently. Mr. Holt approached with a lightweight saddle and a calm smile. "We won't strap it tight," he said. "We'll just let him feel it resting on his back." Dusty stood still at first, but the moment the saddle came near, his ears pinned back and his muscles tensed. Emily whispered softly, stroking his neck. Dusty looked at her with uncertain eyes, then back at the saddle. Mr. Holt gently placed it on his back. Dusty flinched, but didn't move. "That's it, boy," Emily whispered. "You're okay." They left the saddle on for only a few minutes. No straps, no pressure. Just enough for Dusty to get used to the feeling again. Then they took it off and gave him a treat. It was a small step, but Emily knew that even small victories could lead to something great. Over the next few weeks, Dusty became more comfortable with the saddle. Emily would walk him around the paddock with the saddle resting on his back, then eventually with the straps gently secured. Bit by bit, his fear faded. Mr. Holt began teaching Emily how to mount slowly, how to sit lightly in the saddle without startling him, and how to respond to Dusty's body language while riding. The first time Emily sat on Dusty's back, she just sat there, letting him know that he was safe. Dusty stood still, ears turning, tail flicking, but he didn't panic. Emily smiled and tears filled her eyes. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. Riding practice began slowly. Started with short walks inside the fenced paddock. Then Mr. Holt introduced trotting in small circles. Dusty needed time to build muscle again, and Emily needed time to learn how to balance with him. They were both beginners in a way to Dusty, starting over after years of neglect, and Emily discovering her skills as a rider and trainer. Each session ended with gentle brushing, soft words, and quiet moments under the tree near the barn. That old tree became their favorite spot. Emily would sometimes bring a book and read to Dusty while he grazed. Other times, she just sat there with her back against the trunk, watching the sky while Dusty stood beside her. Then came the day when Mr. Holt suggested something surprising. "There's a local horse show next month," he said one afternoon. "It's small, more of a community event than a competition. But it could be a good goal for you both." Emily blinked in surprise. "Us in a horse show?" Mr. Holt nodded. "It's not about winning. It's about showing how far you've come. It would give Dusty a chance to feel what it's like to be among people again. And it would give you both confidence." Emily wasn't sure. Dusty had come a long way, but he still got nervous around crowds and loud noises. The idea of taking him to a place full of strangers, horses, trailers, and loudspeakers made her stomach twist with worry. But deep down, she knew Mr. Holt had a point. They had come so far. Maybe this was the next step. She thought about it for days. Then one night, as she sat in the pasture watching the stars, Dusty came over and rested his head gently on her shoulder. It felt like an answer, like he was saying, "We can try." So they began training with purpose. Mr. Holt helped Emily design a simple routine for the show, nothing flashy. Just a walk-trot pattern with a few turns and stops. It focused on control, calmness, and connection between horse and rider. Emily practiced every day. Dusty responded well most of the time, but there were setbacks too. One day a truck passed the field and honked loudly, and Dusty spooked so badly he refused to train for the rest of the afternoon. Another time, a plastic bag blew across the paddock and sent him into a frenzy. Emily learned how to deal with those moments. Not with anger or frustration, but with understanding. She gave Dusty time to calm down. She talked to him gently. She let him know that she was there always. Slowly, Dusty began to react less. The world still scared him sometimes, but Emily had become his anchor. The day of the horse show arrived. On a bright Saturday morning, Emily barely slept the night before. She packed everything carefully to Dusty's saddle. Grooming supplies, treats, water, and a few ribbons she hoped to wear in his mane. Her parents loaded the small trailer and drove her and Dusty to the showground. Dusty stepped out of the trailer with wide eyes and flared nostrils. The sound of other horses, people laughing, and announcements over loudspeakers filled the air. Emily led him slowly through the area, letting him take in everything. Some people stared at Dusty. His scars were still visible, though they had faded. His body, once thin and weak, now looked strong, but he wasn't as shiny or polished as the other horses. Some riders rode beautiful, expensive horses with perfect manes and shiny saddles. Emily didn't have any of that. What she had was a horse who had learned to trust again. And to her, that was worth more than all the trophies in the world. Their event was a basic walk-trot class. Emily wore her simplest riding outfit, her hair tied back neatly. Dusty had a clean saddle, freshly brushed coat, and a small blue ribbon in his mane. When their turn came, Emily led him into the ring. Her heart was pounding. They began the pattern walking first, then trotting in a circle. Dusty listened to every cue. His ears stayed alert, his head held high. The crowd was quiet, watching carefully. Emily spoke to Dusty softly the entire time. She didn't care who heard. To her, this was about connection. At one point, a balloon popped in the distance. Dusty flinched but didn't run. Emily leaned forward and whispered, "You're okay? I'm here." And Dusty believed her. They finished their routine without any mistakes. As they exited the ring, the crowd clapped politely. A few people even stood up. Emily looked around in surprise and saw a woman wiping her eyes. Another man clapped harder and called out, "Well done." Emily didn't expect to win, but when the results were announced, she and Dusty were awarded a special ribbon, not for placing first, but for most inspiring performance. The announcer said this horse was rescued from a difficult past. What we saw today was trust, heart, and a beautiful bond. Emily held the ribbon with trembling fingers. She didn't cry, not yet, but her heart felt full. Dusty stood beside her calmly, as if he knew what the ribbon meant too. After the show, many people came over to meet Dusty. Children patted his neck. Adults asked about his story. Some said, "I can't believe this is the same horse from the auction." Emily told them everything, how she found him, how broken he was, and how he slowly came back to life. Someone even offered to buy Dusty. A wealthy man with a daughter said, "You've done a great job training him. If you ever think about selling, I'd be happy to pay a fair price." Emily smiled but shook her head gently. "He's not for sale," she said. "He's my partner." That night, back at home, Emily sat under the old tree with Dusty by her side. The ribbon was pinned to the barn wall, not for show, but as a reminder of how far they had come. She looked up at the stars and whispered, "We did it." Dusty snorted softly and rested his head near hers. Emily knew this was only the beginning. There would be more shows, more challenges, and more milestones. But no matter what came next, she and Dusty would face it together. What once was a broken, unwanted horse bought for just $1 had now become something rare and beautiful, a symbol of second chances, of love, and of the quiet magic that happens when someone refuses to give up. After the local horse show, life slowly returned to normal for Emily and Dusty. The ribbon they had won now hung proudly in the barn. But for Emily, the real reward was the bond she had built with Dusty. Every morning she would wake up with excitement, knowing that she would spend another day with her best friend. Dusty had changed her life in ways she had never expected. He wasn't just a horse to her anymore, he was family. But as peaceful and happy as their daily life seemed, something had started to shift around them. Word about Dusty and his transformation was spreading. A few people at the horse show had shared pictures and videos of Emily and Dusty on social media, and soon the story of the $1 horse began to travel farther than anyone expected. One afternoon, Emily got a call from a local journalist who had heard the story and wanted to write an article about Dusty. Emily was surprised but agreed. She thought it would be a good way to share their journey and maybe encourage others to rescue horses instead of buying expensive ones. A week later, the article was published in the local newspaper with the headline, "From Broken to Beautiful, the $1 horse who stole everyone's hearts." The article touched a lot of people. It talked about Dusty's sad beginning, how Emily had taken him in, and how their patience and love had brought him back to life. Readers were inspired, and soon people from other towns began visiting Emily's farm just to meet Dusty. Children wanted to pet him, adults wanted to take pictures with him, and some even brought treats and small gifts. Dusty, who had once feared every human touch, now stood calmly among strangers, his ears flicking with curiosity, his eyes gentle and kind. Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope, addressed to Emily. The handwriting was neat, almost old-fashioned. Inside was a letter from someone named Mrs. Clarissa Montague, who introduced herself as the owner of a large equine foundation. She wrote about how she had read the article and was deeply moved. She said she had seen many horses saved and trained over the years, but Dusty's story was special. What Emily had done, she said, was not just about training a horse, it was about healing a soul. At the bottom of the letter was an invitation. Mrs. Montague wanted Emily and Dusty to attend a prestigious charity event in the city. It was called Hearts and Hooves, a yearly gathering where rescued horses and their caretakers were celebrated. There would be guests, performances, and even awards. She asked Emily if she would be willing to share Dusty's story in person. Emily was shocked. She had never been to a big event like that. The city felt far away, fancy, and a little scary. But at the same time, she knew it was a chance to show the world what Dusty had become. She talked to her parents, who encouraged her to go. She spoke to Mr. Holt, who smiled proudly and said, "This is exactly what you both were meant for." So with a mix of excitement and nervousness, Emily agreed. The preparation began. Dusty's coat was brushed daily, his hooves trimmed, and his saddle cleaned until it shone. Emily practiced speaking in front of her family so she wouldn't be nervous sharing her story. Her mom helped her choose a simple but elegant outfit, and her dad arranged a trailer and hotel near the city. The day of the event arrived, and Emily woke up before the sun. She packed Dusty's gear carefully, double-checked everything, and kissed her little dog goodbye as they drove toward the city. Dusty stood quietly in the trailer, as if sensing that this was no ordinary trip. When they arrived, Emily was stunned by the size of the event. The arena was large, the decorations beautiful, and the people dressed in formal clothes. There were lights, cameras, and even a red carpet. Emily felt out of place at first, but then someone from the organizing team came to greet her. "Must be Emily and Dusty. We've been waiting for you," the woman said with a warm smile. They guided her to a special area, where other rescue horses and their caretakers were preparing. Emily met people from all over the country. Some had rescued abused horses from racing tracks. Others had saved wild horses from dangerous lands. Each story was different, but they all shared something in common: love, patience, and second chances. When Dusty stepped out of the trailer, people turned to look. He still had a few scars, but his coat now gleamed under the lights. His body was strong, his walk proud, and his eyes bright. Emily held his lead rope tightly, whispering, "You've got this." Later that evening, Emily was invited on stage. To share their story, she walked up with Dusty beside her, the lights warm on her face, her heart pounding in her chest. She looked out at the crowd, took a deep breath, and began. She spoke in simple words, from the heart. She talked about finding Dusty at the auction, about how no one had wanted him, how broken and afraid he had been. She described their early days, the struggle to gain his trust, the small steps, the first time she rode him, and the joy of their first show. She talked about love and patience, and how sometimes all someone needs is a second chance. The audience was silent, listening carefully. When she finished, there was a pause, and then the room filled with applause. Emily looked down at Dusty, who stood calmly beside her, his eyes scanning the crowd. He didn't flinch, didn't panic. It was no longer the frightened, trembling horse from the auction. He was someone else now, brave, calm, and proud. As they stepped off the stage, Mrs. Montague came forward. She hugged Emily and said, "You reminded everyone here tonight what rescue truly means." The night wasn't over yet. The final part of the event was the awards. Most of them were planned, like Best Recovery, Best Training Transformation, and Community Contribution. But one award was kept secret each year, the Heart of Gold Award, given to the story that touched everyone the most. When the announcer opened the envelope, he smiled and said, "This year's Heart of Gold award goes to a young girl and a horse that nobody believed in until they found each other. Please welcome back Emily and Dusty." Emily's eyes filled with tears. She walked back to the stage, and this time Dusty walked even closer, as if he too understood what was happening. The announcer handed her a golden plaque shaped like a horse's heart and said, "For reminding us all that true beauty lies not in perfection, but in healing, in trust, and in love. Back at the hotel that night, Emily sat on the floor beside Dusty's stall. The plaque rested on her lap. She didn't need the award to know how special Dusty was. But it felt good to know others saw it too. The next morning, as they drove back home, Emily looked out the window, thinking about everything that had happened. She remembered the day she first saw Dusty at the auction, standing alone, unwanted. She thought about all the nights she had spent talking to him in the barn. The cold mornings, the long rides, the patience, and the love. What amazed her the most was not how much Dusty had changed, but how much she had changed too. Saving Dusty had saved her in a way. It taught her responsibility, compassion, what it means to fight for someone who can't speak for themselves. When they reached home, Dusty stepped off the trailer with ease, walked into the paddock, and gave a loud, proud neigh. Emily laughed, her heart full. She walked beside him, brushing his mane gently, and whispered, "We're just getting started, aren't we?" Dusty nuzzled her softly. From that day forward, Emily began visiting local schools and youth centers, sharing Dusty's story with kids. She spoke about kindness, never giving up, and how every life matters, if the world has forgotten it. Dusty became a symbol in their town, not just a horse, but a lesson in love and hope. And though offers continued to come and people wanting to buy Dusty, sponsor him, or take him to larger shows, Emily always had the same answer: he's not for sale, he's home. What had started with a single dollar had turned into something priceless, a journey of healing, courage, and unbreakable friendship. Time passed quickly after Emily and Dusty returned from the Hearts and Hooves event. The town was still talking about them. Neighbors, children, and even strangers who had never been interested in horses before were now curious about this $1 horse who had become a symbol of hope. Everyone seemed to admire Dusty, but more than that, they respected Emily for what she had done. Life on the farm slowly settled into a calm routine again. Something had changed in Emily. She no longer saw herself as just a girl who loved horses. She felt stronger, more confident, and more sure of who she was. Dusty had helped her grow in ways she had never imagined. Every morning, she still woke up early and went to the barn. She still brushed Dusty's coat, cleaned his stall, and rode him across the fields. But now, she noticed how people began to stop by and watch her ride. Some brought their kids, some asked her questions. Others just stood quietly and smiled. She realized that Dusty wasn't just her story anymore. He had become everyone's inspiration. One day, while Emily was grooming Dusty, she overheard her parents talking in the kitchen. They were discussing how the barn was starting to get visitors almost every day and how Emily's story had started to inspire more people than they had ever imagined. Her father mentioned that maybe, just maybe, it was time to think bigger. Emily stood outside the door, listening quietly. Her heart began to race. She had always dreamed of doing something more for animals like Dusty, animals that had been forgotten, hurt, or left behind.
Oh.
It felt like that dream wasn't so far away that night. She sat down with her parents and shared an idea that had been growing in her heart for weeks. She wanted to turn a part of their land into a rescue center, safe place where unwanted horses could heal and learn to trust again, just like Dusty had. She wanted to teach others how to care for these animals and help them understand that every life, no matter how broken, deserved love. At first, her parents were quiet. It was a big idea, and it would take a lot of work and money. But as they looked at Emily's hopeful face and thought about how far she had come, they nodded. "This is what you want," her mother said. "Then we'll do it together." They started small. They cleaned out an old section of the barn and fixed up the broken fence around a nearby pasture. Mr. Holt, their neighbor and horse expert, offered to help. He taught Emily how to check a new horse for injuries, how to help it gain weight safely, and how to build trust without force. Word began to spread that Emily was accepting rescued horses. And soon the first arrived. Her name was Rosie, a skinny mare, with a dull coat and eyes that looked almost empty. She had been taken from a home where she had been left alone in a muddy paddock with no shelter and little food. The moment Emily saw Rosie step out of the trailer, her heart broke. She remembered how Dusty had looked when she first met him, afraid and confused. But now Emily knew what to do. She spoke gently to Rosie, gave her time, and didn't rush anything. She fed her soft food, brushed her with light hands, and sat nearby every day, just like she had with Dusty. Slowly, Rosie began to lift her head more. Her coat started to shine, started to walk toward Emily on her own. Within 2 months, Rosie was galloping in the field with Dusty, her mane flying. In the wind, her spirit shining through, other horses followed. Some came from shelters, others were brought by owners who could no longer care for them. Each one had its own story, its own pain. And Emily, now more skilled and more confident, met them with the same kindness, patience, and hope she had shown. Dusty she named the place Dusty's Haven, and her father helped her make a small wooden sign to hang at the entrance. It read, "Every soul deserves a second chance." People came from nearby towns to volunteer. Local schools organized trips to visit. Some families even adopted the horses that had recovered, giving them loving homes. Dusty, of course, remained at the heart of it all. He was Emily's partner in every way. Whenever a new horse arrived, Dusty would watch carefully, as if sensing the pain in their eyes. Sometimes he would walk over slowly and stand beside them, calm and quiet. It was as if he remembered what it felt like to be afraid, and wanted them to know they weren't alone. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, Emily stood at the fence and watched Dusty playing in the pasture with Rosie and 2 other horses. Her heart was full. She thought about the day she had bought him for a single $1. She had taken a risk that day, not knowing what would come. But now she knew that single moment had changed everything. Suddenly she heard a car pull up. A man stepped out wearing a dusty hat and jeans. He looked around the pasture, his eyes landing on Dusty. He walked over slowly, stopping just at the fence. Emily greeted him politely, unsure who he was. "Is that Dusty?" the man asked. Emily nodded. "Yes, do you know him?" The man sighed and leaned against the fence. "I used to. I was the one who raised him when he was a colt. He was born on my ranch." Emily was surprised. Her heart skipped a beat. The man explained that hard times had forced him to sell many of his horses. Dusty had gone to a buyer who promised to train him well, but clearly something had gone wrong. When the man saw the article about Dusty's transformation, he couldn't believe it was the same horse. "I came here today to see if it was true," he said softly. To see if someone had really given him a second chance. Emily looked at Dusty, then back at the man. "He saved me too," she said. "We helped each other." The man smiled, tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving him the life I couldn't." That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about how many horses were still out there, waiting for someone to find them, to care for them, to believe in them again. She made a silent promise to Dusty that she would never stop trying. As long as she could, she would keep rescuing, healing, and loving. Years passed, but Dusty's Haven continued to grow. Emily never lost her gentle way, her deep love for horses, or her belief that even the most broken spirit could be mended. His muzzle turned a little gray and his steps grew slower, but he remained the soul of the farm. One spring morning, Emily woke up and saw Dusty standing at the edge of the field, his mane flowing in the breeze. He looked toward the sunrise, then turned his head slowly and looked at her. They shared a quiet moment, the kind of silent understanding that only true friends share. She walked out to him, wrapped her arms around his neck, and said, "You changed my life." When Dusty passed away peacefully a year later, the entire town mourned with Emily. They held a ceremony in the pasture where he had spent his happiest days. Children placed flowers. Adults shared stories. Emily, though heartbroken, stood tall. She knew Dusty would always be with her, not just in memories, but in every horse she saved, in every second chance she gave. She buried him beneath the large oak tree at the edge of the field where he used to stand and watch the sunset. A simple stone marked the spot with the words, "Sold for $1, valued beyond measure." Even after Dusty was gone, his spirit lived on. Dusty's Haven expanded. More barns were built. Volunteers became staff. Emily started a foundation to support other young rescuers. She traveled to speak at schools, horse shows, and animal conferences. She never bragged. She simply shared what Dusty had taught her, that love is the strongest medicine. and that even those who are rejected, forgotten, or broken still have a chance to shine. And so, the story of the $1 horse became something more than just a story. It became a movement, a message, a reminder that sometimes the most incredible things happen when you take a chance on the ones nobody else believes in. Because that's exactly what Emily had done, and the world would never forget it.